Some secrets never die. They wait until you're weak enough to hear them. Atlantis isn't a city drowned by water. It's a memory sealed in the blood of gods. And tonight, Enki hears it calling. Inside the damp cave, waves crashing against rocks sounded like a sentence being passed. Atlantis didn't need to scream. It just waited. It knew. Every vow eventually has its coffin pried open. Enki paused at the cave mouth. Sea wind howling like lost souls. His cloak was heavy with salt and mist, clinging to his aging frame. Breath billowed white, smoke over cold water. Ahead lay a black sea, no stars, no horizon. Just a flat mirror, like a tombstone smothered in seaweed. But he knew it wasn't dead. It was waiting. Atlantis. He closed his eyes. In his chest, a slow, deep thud echoed. Not wind, not waves. The heartbeat of stone. Atlantis didn't call with words. It called with memory. Enki laid his hand on the rock wall. The slick moss felt like old blood. He inhaled deeply, the salt and mold stinging his lungs. In the silence, he heard a voiceless whisper. "Do you remember?" He muttered, voice cracking like rotted wood. "I sealed you to protect them." The sea didn't answer, just the slow, accusing pound of waves. Enki lowered his head. His shadow stretched into the cave like black ink. He wasn't looking for treasure or a lost city. He was hunting an oath he'd betrayed. Atlantis had been waiting for this exact moment. The moment he was weak enough to listen. He stepped inside. Darkness swallowed the last of the moonlight. The space closed around him like the gut of an old beast, damp and rank, with algae and mold. Water pooled at his feet, reflecting a faint phosphorescent glow. On the cave walls, me tablets sat in rows like tombstones for broken promises. Dim green light seeped from cracks, illuminating ancient glyphs that writhed like silver worms. A hollow rumble followed his steps, like a dead language muttering last rites. Enki stopped before the largest tablet. Its surface was slick and cold, carved with spiraling glyphs, forgotten mandalas with no start or end. He stared at it like it was the eye of a betrayed god. He fell to his knees. Cold soaked through his robes. His hands trembled on the stone, freezing but alive. The glyphs quivered, sinking with his breath. A low vibration seeped into his chest. Not words, a frequency. Atlantis spoke in heartbeats. He bowed lower, forehead pressing into wet moss. Broken images cracked through his mind, blood dripping on stone. His shaking hands reciting the sealing spell. Screams of the drowning, and his back turning. Atlantis whispered, not with a voice, but with certainty. "Remember." Enki shuddered. Years of running and excuses. For safety, to protect them, felt thin as soaked paper now. His shoulders shook. He didn't sob aloud, but water slid from his brow onto the tablet like tears. The glyphs drank it in, glowing cold and blue. He heard the old vow. No one will open. No one will remember. But water doesn't forget. Stone doesn't forget. Atlantis doesn't forget. In the darkness, the waves kept pounding, like a slow, patient heartbeat. Atlantis didn't beg. It just waited. It knew memory always outlasts silence. Enki drew a last deep breath, mold and salt burning in his chest. His hands tightened. No more escape, no more hiding. He pressed his palm to the Emmy tablet. The glyphs blazed, cold as a blade in moonlight. A deep sound detonated in his head, wordless, yet full of meaning. Atlantis opened its mouth. It didn't offer him a way out, only the truth. The cold blue light of the Emmy tablet filled the cave like moonlight on stagnant water. The glyphs trembled under Enki's hand, emitting a low sound. Not speech, but the language of stone and time itself. It slid into his ears like a snake, coiling around his mind, tightening at his throat until he couldn't breathe. Atlantis didn't bother greeting him. It just began to speak. At first, it was only a distant echo, like waves breaking far away. But it swelled, heavy as a storm. In that sound, Enki heard cries. Human, divine, his own. His eyes stayed open, but the cave was gone. All he saw was water. Black, swirling water swallowing the sky. He was there, arm outstretched, blood running down, it dripping onto glyphs carved in stone. He saw himself younger, eyes bright with creator's pride, but under it, fear. Chanting the banishment spell, carving the sealing glyphs, locking away not just Atlantis, but his own memory. Waves smashed rock, spirits screamed his name. His hands trembled. His lips kept moving. The spell was finished. Blue light spread, etching the vow into stone and blood. Atlantis's voice cut like a knife. Why did you do it? Enki wanted to answer, but in that vibrating frequency, every excuse shattered like clay. The vision shifted, water rose, roofs collapsed under waves, people waded up to their necks, clutching children who were still torn away. Their screams sounded like a funeral horn. He saw a girl's face, mouth open calling father, hand reaching up through floodwater. His hand didn't reach back. He turned away. The glyphs on the tablet flared. Atlantis's voice slammed into his chest like a boulder. Why did you leave me? Why did you leave them? Enki choked. Every breath felt like cold water climbing his ribs. I wanted to protect them, he rasped, voice crumbling to ash. Atlantis roared like a storm breaking levees. You didn't protect them. You were afraid. He tried to shut it out, but it surged in like a broken dam. Glyphs crawled under his skin, burning cold fire. Blood seeped into the tablet, darkening the moss. Enough! He gasped, trying to wrench his hand free, but the glyphs clung like chains. Atlantis's voice lowered to a ritual drumbeat. Not yet. Look. The cave was gone. He stood on a drowned plain. Sky molten grey. Wind shrieked, carrying fragments of prayers. At the center stood the sealing gate he'd built. Cracked, glowing blue like the eyes of the dead. He saw himself kneeling there, blood dripping from his arm. Gods around him silent. Enlil watching with iron eyes, neither stopping nor helping. Enki remembered that stare. Someone willing to kill half of humanity for being too noisy. Atlantis wouldn't let him turn away. The sound of waves sank to a whisper. You didn't object. You stayed silent. Enki screamed. Tears streamed but didn't wash anything away. He pounded the tablet. Blood smeared across glyphs lighting them up like wounds. A deep sound forced him to the ground. The vision twisted, water drained away, leaving bodies in mud, eyes wide open, mouths frozen mid-call for parents, gods. Atlantis rumbled like distant thunder. They didn't forget. I didn't forget. You will remember. Enki sprawled there, shoulders shaking. Breath ragged, like someone dragged from drowning. Water dripped from the ceiling onto his back in a slow, merciless rhythm. Atlantis's voice softened. No more roaring, like a priest intoning judgment in a temple. Memory isn't a curse, it's a debt. Enki's shoulders heaved. No loud sobs, just the silent shaking of a man who knew there was no escape. His fingers fumbled across the tablet, trembling like a blind man feeling for a door. The tablet's glow dimmed, cooled, but the glyphs still burned faintly, like embers in cold ash. Atlantis no longer asked why. It waited for him to breathe, waited for him to accept. Enki lay there, cheek pressed to the wet moss, listening to each water drop echo like a slow heartbeat. Atlantis didn't need to scream anymore. It knew he had nowhere left to hide. Enki lay with his cheek pressed to the wet moss, breath rasping with the stink of salt, mold and blood. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop like a slow, cold heartbeat. Atlantis was silent, but it wasn't forgiveness. It was the hush before final judgment. Then the deep sound returned, no longer roaring like a storm, but steady as a ritual drum. Atlantis spoke, not in words, but in a pulse that forced his heart to listen. We're not done. Enki flinched like a child bracing for punishment. Under his hand, the Emi tablet ignited with cold light. Glyphs pulsed, silver veins snaking back into his skin. A vibration sank into his chest, pulling him under. The cave dissolved. He stood on a wide plain beneath a white, pitiless sun. Before him, thousands of people labored under stone, backs raw and bleeding. The air was thick with groans like fog. On a stone dais, an overseer read aloud from glowing glyphs. Enki recognized them. Me. The tablets he'd written. Each phrase was law, not knowledge, commands to obey. He lifted a hand as if to stop it. Atlantis's voice rumbled. Look. The whip cracked. Builders carved glyphs into walls. Not to learn, but to mark their master's name. Curse of obedience in stone. Enki staggered back, bumping into a small boy. The child looked up with dull eyes, clutching a clay tablet streaked with blood. The boy's lips trembled. You taught me to read. I have to read it right. Enki shook. Atlantis's voice didn't shout. It was low, relentless. You taught them to read so they could sign their own chains. The vision changed. A grand hall bathed in firelight. Kings sat in a circle, fingers on meat tablets, glyphs glowing. An old emperor pressed his finger to the symbols and vowed, I obey, so I may rule. Enki saw himself in the shadows, cloak heavy with salt and guilt. He had taught them to write, so they could bind each other with words. He screamed, but the sound fell cold. Atlantis didn't silence him. It just made him see. The vision twisted again, children chanting glyphs like prayers. When grown, they held whips, eyes as cold as carved stone. They didn't understand the words. They obeyed them. Enough, Enki rasped. But Atlantis didn't stop. A city burned. Stone pillars fell. Screams and metal clashed. On the walls, glyphs blazed unburned, still commanding. Leaders bellowed them like spells. Atlantis's voice cut slow as a blade. You didn't just teach them to remember. You taught them to obey. Enki collapsed, fists slamming mud slick with blood. Glyphs crawled from the earth, coiling around his wrists like chains. I didn't want this, he gasped. I just wanted to save them. Atlantis didn't laugh, didn't scold. It intoned, ancient and heavy. You wanted to save them, but you didn't trust them. You wanted to teach, but wouldn't share. Enki's body shook, memories surged. Nights carving glyphs by torchlight. Blood drying on his hands. The sealing spell vibrating in his veins. The last words he spoke. No one will open. Atlantis repeated it back like a curse. No one will open. No one will understand. No one will be free. Enki screamed, voice drowning in the deep, relentless rumble of water. Atlantis waited for him to go silent. Then it spoke, soft as wind through ancient ruins. You never apologized. You weren't sorry. You were afraid. Enki collapsed fully, forehead in the mud. Blood dripped from his bitten lips. Atlantis didn't force him. It waited, letting his breath slow, letting the truth seep in. Enki shut his eyes. Even in darkness, the glyphs glowed behind his eyelids, etching their question onto his mind. Will you pay the price? He lay there, blood and tears mixing with the cold earth. Breath in ragged bursts, lungs burning like mun. Atlantis was silent now, but it was the silence of a temple awaiting sacrifice. Under his hand, the A tablet still glowed faintly. Glyphs writhed like silver snakes in damp moonlight. A low sound rose again. Not accusation, but an ancient chant, steady, heavy, unchanging. Enki shuddered. In that vibration, he heard not just his own voice, but thousands of others. Children laughing, mothers singing lullabies, whips cracking, prayers, curses, the sobbing of the drowned. Atlantis didn't speak. It sang, a song you couldn't block with ears. The glyphs under his palm glowed brighter. Cold blue light snaked up his arm, sinking into skin like living fire. He tried to pull away, but the ME held him fast. On the tablet, glyphs twisted in spirals. No longer random symbols, but a single mandala, an unblinking eye staring into his heart. Atlantis didn't command. It pulsed, slow and deep. You want to understand, then merge. Enki sobbed, voice cracked. I'm afraid. I don't trust them. The mandala flared, spirals folding in on themselves like a collapsing universe. Atlantis answered in a slow, thunderous heartbeat. No sharing, no understanding, no understanding, no peace. Enki gasped, blood oozing between his fingers. The glyphs drank it like ink. The glow spread through the cave. Other ME tablets lit up in eerie chorus. Water rippled in sync with the sound. In that rhythm, he heard wind screaming through ancient stone. Babies taking first breaths. Old people sighing their last. Atlantis wasn't an accuser anymore. It was the sum of all memory, buried and unspoken. Enki shook his head violently. If I share it, they'll do it again. They'll kill each other. The sea will run red. Atlantis didn't argue. The mandala let out a low, resigned tone, like the earth sighing. Visions flashed. A child teaching his sibling to write. An old woman carving glyphs to pray for rain. A soldier etching curses. A priest chanting commands. A mother singing glyphs like a lullaby. Good and evil tangled like roots in wet soil. No clean separation. No purity. Enki wept. Atlantis whispered, old as dust. You don't trust them. You don't even trust yourself. The mandala contracted. Its pulse slowed. Atlantis lowered the sound until it lived only in his blood. No one goes alone. Enki collapsed onto the tablet, shoulders shaking. Tears and blood soaked the glyphs, making them flare. The cave transformed. Walls vanished. Only endless spirals of sound and heartbeats remained. Atlantis didn't speak anymore. It waited. Waited for Enki to answer. Not with words. With his heartbeat. Enki lay there, breath ragged but slowing. The cave felt silent around him, cold and damp as a tomb. But Atlantis wasn't gone. It was waiting. The Emmy tablet under his hand glowed faintly, glyphs shifting like silver embers. A low vibration trembled in his chest. Not a voice now, a heartbeat that wasn't his alone. Atlantis didn't accuse anymore. It didn't demand an apology. It simply pulsed, merge. Enki inhaled sharply. The word wasn't spoken, but he felt it press into his ribs. He trembled. I can't. He thought of floodwaters rising over rooftops, screams swallowed by black waves, kings reading me tablets like spells, whips cracking over children's backs. Atlantis didn't argue. It pulsed again, slower, deeper. No sharing, no understanding, no peace. Enki felt blood ooze from under his fingers where the glyphs bit his skin. They drank it in, lines flaring blue, then fading to a dull glow. The whole cave seemed to breathe with him, in slow, heavy unison. Other Emmy tablets on the walls lit up in answer. Their glyphs twisted, forming spirals that folded inward like living mandalas. He watched them, heart pounding. The symbols weren't just letters. They were eyes, and they all turned to him. Atlantis's heartbeat filled the space, steady as ritual drums. If you want to know, you must become. Enki shook his head. Tears blurred his vision. If I share it, they'll destroy each other. They'll drown in it again. Atlantis was silent, not dismissive, just waiting. Enki saw flickering images. A child teaching letters to a sibling by firelight. A woman carving glyphs to pray for rain. A soldier scratching curses onto armor. A priest chanting commands. A mother humming glyphs like lullabies. Good and evil, braided together like roots in wet earth. No clean lines, no single truth. Enki sobbed. His voice cracked. I don't trust them. I don't trust myself. Atlantis pulsed again, slower, deeper, until the sound lived only in his veins. No one goes alone. Enki slumped forward, resting his forehead on the tablet. His tears fell freely, soaking into the mossy stone. The glyphs glowed faintly under him, feeding on the salt. He felt the tablet shift under his touch. The spiral glyphs tightened, forming a single living mandala. An eye, unblinking, not accusing, watching, waiting. Atlantis didn't speak now. It had no more arguments. It simply existed. Enki's breath rattled. He felt the ocean outside the cave pounding rock in steady rhythm. A call. Not words, not command. A memory asking to be carried. He shut his eyes, shivering, and whispered so low it was almost thought. "Teach me your frequency." The tablet under his hands pulsed once, blue light dimming to a calm, steady glow. The entire cave seemed to exhale. The echo softened. The ME tablets on the walls faded from blinding flames to dull embers. Water dripped. Cold spread across the floor. But Enki didn't tremble. He felt it. A silence that wasn't absence, it was an invitation. He opened his eyes. The cave was still here. Damp, cold, reeking of seaweed and salt. But it felt different. Less like a prison, more like a temple. He looked at his hands. Glyphs glimmered faintly under the skin. Not scars, not chains. Just memory. Atlantis didn't speak. But he heard it anyway. A single beat, steady, unrelenting, alive. Enki remained kneeling in the cold dark, breath heavy but even. The cave had fallen silent except for the slow drip of water. The ME tablet beneath his palms was no longer searing, but cool, humming with a faint blue glow. Atlantis didn't demand, didn't threaten. It simply waited. His hands were cut and raw. Glyphs etched in blood glimmered faintly under his skin. He watched them pulse with a rhythm that wasn't quite his own. He understood now. Atlantis wouldn't surrender secrets to anyone wanting to take. It required someone willing to become the promise. He drew in a long, ragged breath, filling his lungs with the cave's damp, fungal air. Outside, he heard the sea batter the rocks with relentless, patient force. He felt small, mortal, but he didn't turn away. He closed his eyes, and he saw a cracked stone gate. Glyphs spiraled along its edge in endless loops. Beyond it lay black water, living, breathing, moving with a will of its own. Atlantis wasn't a drowned city of stone. It was memory sealed away, knowledge twisted into chains by fear. A vow that had become a prison. It waited for someone willing to open that gate, not to possess what was inside, but to carry it. His voice shook, more thought than sound. "I won't hide it anymore." The mandala under his palms pulsed once, a slow, deliberate heartbeat. The glyphs dimmed, fading to pale scars in his skin, unerasable. He opened his eyes. The cave was dark again. The greenish glow had died. But it wasn't suffocating anymore. Water dripped. The wind outside wailed through narrow gaps in the rock, sounding like breath from some old god waiting beyond the door. Enki pushed himself to his feet, legs shaking, back bent under the weight of memory. He stepped forward, boots scraping wet stone. He paused at the mouth of the cave. Salt wind slapped his face, sharp and real. Ahead stretched a black ocean, endless and unbroken. The waves crashed like an ancient heartbeat, spraying silver under a pale moon. He didn't see the surface anymore. He saw the depth, the swirling, breathing memory that waited at the bottom. Atlantis. He inhaled, filling his chest until it hurt. His fingers curled tight, feeling the glyphs in his blood. He was no longer the sealer, no longer the teacher who withheld knowledge out of fear. He was the vow. He was the me. He was Atlantis. His voice was low, steady, like a final rite spoken to the sea. I'm not searching for Atlantis anymore. I will become Atlantis. The wind howled in answer. The sea slammed rock, unrelenting, unrepentant. But Enki didn't flinch. He understood. The seal was never in stone. It was in blood. And there was no spell that could keep memory buried forever. One day, someone would have to open it, not to take it, but to become it. He closed his eyes. The wind pressed against him. The sea breathed, and he breathed with it. If you can still hear that low call in your blood, remember, secrets don't die. They wait for someone willing to carry them. And when the time comes, may you have the courage not just to uncover them, but to become them.